Some good news today. Good-ish news, at least. Look, this chart was posted today on our blog by the great and good Steve Bannon, who now blogs here. Steve's arrival as the latest addition to the Rachel Maddow Show staff is my own personal Christmas in January. It's very, very exciting. But as you can see from Steve Bannon's chart here, the good news, the economy is growing a little. We are on the positive side of zero. That's what that last bar on the right means. Back that part, at the end of 2008, start of 2009, that's when Wall Street blew up. And it seriously seemed like the world might too. It was about that time, 3 years ago, January 2009, as the wave of that economic disaster was crashing down on us, that Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Ohio got up on the floor of Congress and said something that will be in the history books forever. When the story is written of how America survived the worst economic disaster to befall us since the Great Depression, what Marcy Kaptur said in Congress that January 15th, 2009, will be part of the history as it is told.
So why should any American citizen be kicked out of their homes in this cold weather in Ohio? It's going to be 10, 20 below zero. Don't leave your home. Because you know what? When those companies say they have your mortgage, unless you have a lawyer that can put his finger or her finger on that mortgage, you don't have that mortgage. And you're going to find they can't find the paper up there on Wall Street. So I say to the American people, you'll be squatters in your own homes. Don't you leave. In Ohio and Michigan and Indiana and Illinois and all these other places where our people are being treated like chattel. And this Congress is stymied.
Stay in your homes. Don't you leave. Make the bastards at the banks drag you out by the heels. I mean, what Marcy Kaptur was saying that day was in part pure catharsis, right? But she was also making a quite sophisticated legal argument. They're not going to be able to find the paper down there on Wall Street. She was making that argument years ahead of almost everybody else in Washington.
When those companies say they have your mortgage, unless you have a lawyer that can put his finger or her finger on that mortgage, you don't have that mortgage. And you're going to find they can't find the paper up there on Wall Street.
Marcy Kaptur, it turns out, was right. In order to create their personal gargantuloid fortunes from trading other people's houses, Wall Street first had to devise a way to bundle zillions of mortgages together so they could bet on them and buy them and sell them in bulk. One house, that's a deal between you and your bank that can take months to finish up. 10,000 houses, that's something Wall Street can flip in a New York instant. But when Wall Street did that, when they created those bundles, they broke the link between your one house and the bank you borrowed money from to buy that house. And it turns out the implications of that one simple little fact are astounding. In January 2011, 2 years after Marcy Kaptur's speech that we just played, the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled that the banks had no right to foreclose on 2 homes. The court decided those loans had been shuffled around so many times among so many investors that nobody knew who had the right to kick the homeowners out if they stopped paying. Financial blogger Felix Salmon looked at the case and wrote, quote, anybody who was foreclosed on in Massachusetts should now be phoning up their lawyer and trying to figure out if the foreclosure was illegal. If it was, then the borrower should be able to get their deed and their home back from the bank. So Marcy Kaptur was right 3 years ago. They can't take your house. If you look around, you'll see cases like the one in Massachusetts popping up everywhere. This month in Nevada, the state Supreme Court considering the case of Andrew and Loretta Davis, who say their mortgage, too, does not legally belong to the bank that's trying to kick them out of that house. If they win, thousands of Nevada families will have reason to ask whether the banks had any right to kick them to the curb, too. And while we just got another sign that Marcy Kaptur was right, this time it came from a different place. After years of federal prosecutors schnorfeling around Wall Street trying to find some way to assign blame for the Wall Street disaster that ate the whole country's economy, President Obama announced this week that he is ready to look at what Wall Street did to Main Street as a potential crime.
And tonight I'm asking my Attorney General to create a special unit of federal prosecutors and leading state attorney general to expand our investigations into the abuse of lending and packaging of risky mortgages that led to the housing crisis. This new unit will hold accountable those who broke the law, speed assistance to homeowners, and help turn the page on an era of recklessness that hurt so many Americans.
Today, Attorney General Eric Holder announced that he has a working group ready to go forward to do what the president is asking, to sort through what Wall Street did in betting on average Americans' homes, and to put the bankers on trial wherever the evidence warrants prosecution. We are now almost 3 years removed from Marcy Kaptur's plea to families to have confidence that the law will protect them even as the banks come to get them. A scene like this one, a foreclosed home, the family who used to live here gone God knows where. A scene like this is definitely tragic. It can be enraging. But is this also a crime scene, like a mugging or an assault? Could this also be a crime? Joining us now for the interview is Eric Schneiderman. He's the Attorney General of the great state of New York. He's the leader of the president's new financial crimes unit. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rich.
In terms of the president's language, what he said was expanding our investigations into the abusive lending and packaging of risky mortgages that led to the housing crisis. People who have not been following this issue closely and may not understand the specifics. How should we understand what you are tasked to do?
Our working group is going to dig into all of the conduct that blew up the economy. It's not really a secret. I spent 15 years representing folks in financial services, Wall Street firms. Everyone knows what happened. The market went up, the housing market went up, and in ordinary market circumstances, it would have come back down. But they were making so much money with the bundling of mortgages into mortgage-backed securities that they sliced up and sold to pension funds and mutual funds and investors all around the world. It was just hard to let go of. So you can see, as you go from 04 to 05 to 06, the standards for loans going down. People who, as the president said, didn't understand and shouldn't have taken on the loans, getting the loans. The number of no documentation loans, negative amortization loans where you're paying every month but you owe more principal, going up from 03, 04, 05. So we know what happened. We know what created the bubble and we know what created the crash. It was not an earthquake. It was not a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster, and our task force is now given both the charge and the resources in the jurisdiction to go in and figure out exactly what happened and hold anyone who was responsible accountable.
If, as you say, it's not a secret, if the basics are understood about what happened, why haven't there been prosecutions thus far?
Well, I think first of all, there have been some, and there are prosecutors who pursued cases. You mentioned a couple of my colleagues who actually are a part of our working group, Attorney General Martha Coakley in Massachusetts, Attorney General Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada, which were just mentioned, also Beau Biden in Delaware and Lisa Madigan from Illinois. So there are folks who have been working on this. What the president came to understand, I became Attorney General about a year ago and started digging into this and realized that New York and Delaware, which is why my collaboration with Beau Biden was so important, we had a unique place because all of the mortgage-backed securities were actually pools of mortgages deposited into New York trusts or Delaware trusts. We started looking at what she's talking about. Did they actually get all the paperwork done and things like that, and realized that there was a lot of work to do, but a lot of potential for proving liability. We started discussing this with our federal counterparts a few months ago. I've been in discussions with them and negotiations, but the president really took hold of this and said, you know what, we don't want to do this gradually. I'm going to throw resources behind this. I'm going to mandate that the Attorney General put together all the agencies you need. To get this done, Rachel, you need resources, you need jurisdiction, and you need will. And when I stood there today with Eric Holder and my other colleagues in government, other prosecutors, I really felt that we have that level of commitment.
There has been a sense in terms of pursuing accountability on these issues that you and some of the other state attorney generals who you've mentioned have sort of wanted to be more aggressive or maybe more hard-nosed in terms of your approach toward the banks that you're looking and the mortgage holders that you're looking at here, more aggressive than the federal government has. The creation of this task force and your role in it, should we see that divide as now something different? Is there a divide between the state approach and the federal approach now, or is it now a unified cause?
No, actually what we realized as we started to go back and forth over the last few months is that we all need to work together. There's situations that New York's securities law is a stronger securities law in some ways than the federal laws. Some of our statutes of limitations, though, are shorter, so we can't go as far back. The federal statute is longer. We need everyone together. And the folks that we have in on this, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Rich Cordray, a whole array of new powers just came into existence with his appointment, which the president just got done very recently. That's a huge addition. We have the Internal Revenue Service in because there are huge tax fraud implications to some of the stuff that went on. All of the people who are in this, all of the agencies that have been designated, working together can achieve so much more than any one of us on our own. I mean, we were working really hard here, Attorney General Biden and I, and we were getting somewhere. But nothing compared to what we can do with the level of cooperation the president has now mandated. And I'm telling you, the excitement in the room when we had our first working group meeting, of people realizing the potential for what we can do with the hundreds of attorneys and investigators and accountants we can now throw into this, was really palpable.
New York State Attorney General, leader of the President's new Financial Crimes Unit, for lack of a better term, Eric Schneiderman, it's a real pleasure to talk to you about this stuff, but I'm also hoping that as one of the people who I think is good about talking about these things in a way that regular people understand, I hope that this will allow you to still do more media. I mean, both with me, but in general, I think that you're good at explaining this stuff, and the country has a real interest in hearing it from somebody plain-spoken like yourself. So my appeal to you.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm not sure. I'm certainly not going to avoid your show like some folks.
Very good. Fair enough. Good luck, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Did you hear that there is a special extra Nevada caucus after the normal Nevada caucus this year? There's the Nevada caucuses, and then there's an extra one. It's weird, right? Weirder even than you would imagine until you hear the details. Stay tuned.